Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. All right, I want to start this morning. So we're session 4 here, chapter 3 in our books, More Common Sense about Children. And I want to start with this submitted question, or a struggle of, our biggest struggle is being on the same page as husband and wife in parenting. I want to use that. This is an old coaching adage that I used to use on the bottom of the screen there. Being on the same page is more important than being on the right page. Here's what that means. I'll tell you what it means in basketball. There's a million different offenses and defenses you can run, but it's more important than finding the exact best system is making sure that everyone is on the same system, believing in the same things, pulling in the same direction. Does that make sense? This is true in parenting also. Your struggle of identifying the struggle, we're not on the same page in parenting, that's vital to figure out. And there are things in this chapter, especially, but everywhere in this book, there are things in this chapter I would not prescribe to you as parents. There's some things that he advises as far as physical interventions with, we didn't use switches on our kids or squeeze their necks. If you read this, that wasn't our deal. Okay, so I would say, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. They'd either read something in here that I don't like. What I don't want to say is, well, look, I'm not going to listen to anything this guy says because of the switch thing. I would say throw that out. Instead of trying to find a resource that you agree with everything in, we have to decide as husband and wife, as mom and dad, what page we're going to be on. I would throw out some of the physical interventions in this book and negative reinforcement techniques. And that is, not only is it fine, that's what I would suggest. But we better figure out as husband and wife what are going to be the things we do that our kids do not like when we need to intervene. So I will agree with him that we have to have something, that causes some sort of pain, whether that be physical, emotional. What are the things we're going to take away? What are the things that, how are we going to, if we're going to spank, how is that going to go down? But being on the same page with my spouse, if we are not, we had better have real conversations about that because we absolutely need to be on some of these things. So with that, by way of introduction, let's look at page 34. A new not goal of parenting. Behavior control is one we've been saying is not the goal of parenting. According to the top of page 34, what is not the goal of parenting according to the top of page 34? The goal is not to raise perfect kids. Now, why is that important to remember? There can be lots of answers to this. So the goal of parenting is not to produce perfect kids. Why is that important to remember? A, it's not possible. Why else? Okay. Jared says, if we set standards that we expect out of our kids that they cannot reach, well, how's that damage a kid, you think? Okay. Okay. They can just feel unworthy, less than, unloved. What else? Makes their life performance-based. How do I gain acceptance? Through performance. I've got to try to be good enough. Definitely. What might that do with our discipline? Without knowing it, if we are expecting our kids to be perfect, I think we might wind up punishing our kids when they are, kids. We might wind up punishing our kids for their imperfections. What might that? And we might become a stumbling block to them learning. Right? There can be disciplinary events, but the goal of discipline is not me working my frustration out on my kid, making them scared of me. The goal is for them to learn. Right? And man, if every time my kid is imperfect, I blow my top or lose it, and I'm angry at them because sort of who they are, that becomes a wedge in between us. Right? I want to be approachable to my kids the way God is always approachable to me. Even when I mess up, I can always go climb on God's lap. He always loves me because of who He is and because of who He has made me. And that's sort of what we want to have with our kids. We want our kids to be able to approach us with their failures and imperfections, not be terrified to approach us with their failures and imperfections. Talk about, I guess I stepped all over letter B there. How can biblical faith help us to remember this and act accordingly with our kids? God is approachable. He has made Himself approachable with His imperfect children. And that's the relationship that we want with our kids. If we want our kids to someday be able to say, God, I failed, and confess their sins, guess what the number one obstacle to them feeling like they can do that toward their God is? If they can't do that sort of thing with their mom or dad. If when I am imperfect, I get rejected by my mom and dad, that's what they will think God is like. So finding out how to help a kid learn things that are not good for them are not good for them, without them at the same time believing I am what is bad and I am not acceptable to my parents. That's what we have to keep in mind, and because God is the one who is good at that. Other things about that concept? Mm. Absolutely. Legalism in family life or Christian life leads to legalism in family life, and vice versa. If I have to, by all means, hide my imperfections from my earthly father or mother, I will think that's the best way to do it with my heavenly Father. When I get found out, it's going to be bad. Anything else? Number two, what does Dobson say is the objective of parenting? This is second full paragraph on page 34, the beginning. I'll just read this. The objective, as I see it, is to take the raw material with which our babies arrive on this earth and then gradually mold it into mature, responsible, and God-fearing adults. That's a pretty good goal, I would say. Now, why is it important to keep that in mind? If that's our objective, why is it important to remember, or what is important to remember in that objective of parenting? What's that? Okay, it's not a sudden change. Any improvement and growth is slow. Okay? What else is important for that being our objective in parenting? Mm. Mm. Yeah, this stuff is caught more than it is taught. Who do I want my child to turn into? I had better be that kind of person. Why else is this important to? Why is it important to remember? Let's take this part. The raw material with which our babies arrive on this earth. Why is it important to keep that in mind? I'm supposed to take the raw materials, this child the way he or she is, and how do I mold them into a mature, God-fearing adult someday? Why is the raw materials they have, why is that important? I think a very common mistake is I'm trying to shape my child into what I hoped I would have before I had kids. Because I always wanted the star quarterback. Because I always wanted the best musician. Because I always wanted a kid who got a 34 on the ACT. Because I always wanted, right? Instead of, who is this infinitely valuable person made in the image of God? And how do I shape them to be not captain of the volleyball team, but how do I shape them to be a mature, responsible, God-fearing adult? And gradually. Maybe I stepped on letter B again. What other objectives can be tempting to put in place of this one? Any other ideas? What other objectives do parents sometimes have? I think maybe most commonly is I want a kid who will make me feel the way I want to feel. I've always wanted to feel like, because I have my own achievement issues, I've always wanted to feel like I'm somebody. And so I want to have a kid who is whatever, better than other kids, and I'm disappointed when they're not better at some sort of achievement thing. I think is a very common one. Or maybe I'm just telling my own story again. Anything else on that? The objective of parenting? Are things we put in its place? All right, the second core principle. The first core principle is in the previous chapter, and that was a child respecting her parents is like the foundational thing. The second core principle of child rearing, he says, this is bottom of 34 still, the best opportunity to communicate often occurs after a disciplinary event. I talked about this last time somewhat. The best opportunity to communicate often occurs after a disciplinary event. First question underneath that, why might it feel like this is not true? Or why does it just seem like that maybe isn't true? Yeah. Okay. A lot of hurt feelings, and if I discipline them, they won't listen to me. If I do something negative, if I take their iPad away for this set period of time, they're going to be so mad, they're not going to listen to, they're going to shut down, and I'm not going to be able to reach their heart. That's what I was thinking of. Feels untrue. Related, anything else? That was the answer I was thinking. How about this, letter B? What mistakes could we make as parents that might keep this from being true? So he says the best opportunity to communicate often occurs after a disciplinary event. What mistakes could we make as parents that might keep this from being true? Disciplining out of anger. Punishment more than discipline. Yes. What else? Focusing on your own emotions rather than a child. What else? I think if I'm disciplining them for something that was not a clear directive, like you're just on my last nerve, right? Your little kid is dancing and singing and bouncing around, and you just got to the point where you couldn't take it anymore, and you started some disciplinary event. Like, if you try to, when they're honestly like, they had no idea, there was no line, I did not know I was crossing a line, then I'd go try to reach that child's heart and talk to them about what they've done wrong. And they didn't know. Anytime where they feel like they're being disciplined because of who they are, not what they've done. So how might keeping this principle in mind, the best opportunity to communicate is going to come after this disciplinary event. How might keeping that principle in mind change our attitude as parents toward discipline? I think this is a very powerful principle to keep in mind before you discipline your child. The best opportunity to communicate is going to come after this disciplinary event. Why is it important to keep that in mind? You have a goal in mind with your discipline. And what is that goal? Well, you're trying to correct. If there's something to be corrected, you'll probably give up more, like they're just messing around, whatever. It's not business really. So when it comes to the time when they are actually doing something that we need to stand up for to correct them with, you're going to do it behaviorally for yourself more than for their behavior to make them so you can actually have the opportunity. Yes. If my overall goal is I'm trying to take who this child is and raise him or her into a responsible, caring, God-fearing adult, there's something has happened that there needs to be a disciplinary event. But my goal in this event is I want to talk to them at the end of this and reach their heart. That will help shape who I am during this disciplinary event. Now, I don't want to do something during the disciplinary event that will shut them down, make them less likely to listen to me at the end of this. I know, hey, there's going to be a physical disciplinary event. We're taking some electronics away. You got to sit in the corner. Whatever you decide to do where you're going to be on the same page that is negative reinforcement that they don't like in the moment, but I'm going to do that in a way where at the end of this, I want to talk. I want them to get something out of it more than I just want them to get it during it. If that makes sense. So describe in general how a disciplinary event should unfold. What should a parent do before, during, and after a disciplinary event? Somebody take a stab at that essay question. That's a paragraph-long answer. So describe in general what a disciplinary event should look like before, during, after. How about?
If you come out swinging, the first thing, that's probably a sign that the discipline is not being done.
Yeah. Okay, so before, what do you think we should do before spanking, taking the iPad away, you name it, whatever you're going to do? What should happen before? I think we should talk about what has happened and what the line was. How about during? What should I be like during the disciplinary event?
I would picture the Adventures in Odyssey and remembering that as a kid, like listening to whenever the father and mother would discipline the kid, like, how are they so calm?
Who are these people? Yeah.
About that guy didn't get that
Mm.
concept. So, but trying to do that, I certainly did it wrong maybe more times than the 2 or 3 times I've done it maybe right.
Mm.
But I will say, like on Caleb, there's been a couple times where it's like when we've actually sat down and said, okay, what did you do? You know you did. What did you do? Okay, I'm going to have to spank him once for this.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's just so much easier because it's like he knows he did it wrong. He accepts it. It's not like we're trying to beat the kid.
Yeah.
And then usually it's like there's a hug and then like he's off and fine. And it's like, oh, okay. This
Yes.
is supposed to be done and I do this once and the 400 times I do it wrong. Why am I doing it?
Yeah. So before there's a communication of what was the line? You know, what did mommy say about whatever it is that's been going on? What did you do? Right now you've put daddy in a situation where you have made it to where we're in this situation. Here are the consequences mommy said was going to happen. And it's like, I'm disappointed that this happens. Like, this is not what I want to be doing. The old, this is going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt you, right? It's, I don't know if that's necessarily true, but it is, we're on the same team here. Neither one of us likes this is where we're at, but it is your behavior that's put us here. And then and that's what you talk about at the end too. And it is warm, and I love and accept you, and we together, we're going to do this better moving forward. But they know where the line is. That, in general, is what it looks like. Anything else? What it should look like? Anything else in there? When he, on page 35, right in the middle of the page, after emotional ventilation, the child will often want to crumple to the breast of his parent, and he should be welcomed with open, warm, loving arms. At that moment, you can talk heart to heart. You can tell him how much you love him, how important he is to you. You can explain why he was disciplined and how he can avoid the difficulty next time. So important. Whatever the consequences are, after those consequences have happened, there should be no more feeling of, I still don't like you, kid. I'm still sore about all. No. Here's what the line was. Here's what the consequences were. Those consequences are over. I love you just as much as I did if you had never had done that. We just had to have consequences. Because again, God does not love us based on our performance. He loves us based on how He created us and who He is. That is what and that is true. They will love you and not want to disappoint you. And oftentimes, bigger tears after it's done and mommy still loves me than the tears of I'm about to get a spanking or that hurt or I really want to watch YouTube. On 36, he talks about how, second full paragraph, parental warmth after such discipline is essential to demonstrate that it is the behavior and not the child himself that the parent rejects. Afterward is super important. All right, his third core principle, bottom of 36, is control without nagging. It is possible. All right, he does a really good job of laying out parents who use anger to get action instead of action to get action. I love this line, the very last sentence on 36. Trying to control children by screaming is as utterly futile as trying to steer a car by honking the horn. Love it. It's perfect. All right, so what are the things that kids learn when a parent uses increasingly angry nagging to control behavior? What do the kids learn from that style of parenting? It's not self-control. That is correct. What else do kids learn? Okay, somebody else you two said the same thing. They learn where the flashpoint is, and so they really learn they don't have to listen to mom or dad until DEFCON 1. What else do they learn? Remember, we're creating adults here. What do they learn from watching the adult? And the way to get what you want is through anger and emotion. Man, have we been trained that way? Watch adults do conflict. We raise the emotional stakes until somebody backs down. That's the natural way to do conflict. Then he says, somewhere in here, and I may be stepping on a later question, and the worst thing about this is we're reasoning, we're talking because we don't want to do spanking. And then what happens at the end of these things usually anyway? Somebody's getting hit, right? Not calmly, not the way we've said a discipline event should go down, right? This is why one of the main arguments against spanking kids is I don't want to teach my kid to hit. I don't either. But doing it the way he says not to do it right here, get angrier, lose control, then you'll get your way. That's teaching your kid to hit. That's teaching your kid to control others physically, emotionally, whatever. Spanking, corporal punishment that way, does not teach your kids to get hit if you're not doing it when you're violently angry. Right? And by the way, your kids don't have to learn to do bad stuff. They'll pick that up on their own. Right? Right? So some of us have had kids that bite people. Did they learn that because when they got in trouble, you bit them? Is that why they learned that? Or did they learn that because they're sinners and they're broken and they do, I don't know. Right? I want to talk, I think he might maybe it does create a parent who's just always on the edge of half boiling. He talked about warnings here. This is something we picked up from this that was very effective to us. Whether it's bath time, time to brush your teeth, time to go to bed, time to eat, whatever. Your kids are doing their whatever they are doing. They don't like time to come. I said right now, right? They're doing something they think is important. I know you think whatever they're doing is not very important. In the big scheme of things, it's probably not. But we found it really does teach respect. Hey, I value you and what you think is important. It's going to be time to eat in 10 minutes. So in 10 minutes, we'd set a time. We used to set a timer when we first started doing this. It's going to be time for bath time in 15 minutes when this thing goes off. So they know, you know, right? And then there's a clear line. It's not the gradual crescendo until you, some of the stuff we did, our kids were doing, we weren't crazy about the video games, especially our boys played, but man, did they like them. And getting them to quit in the middle of one, you'd think we were asking them to, cut off a limb. So, hey, where are you at on that? Well, that one's probably 10 minutes here. That teaches them that you respect and value them also, and sets, again, a clear line. B, if parents do not learn to discipline with actions and not discipline with nagging and emotions, what things can they assume will continue to happen in their relationship with their kids? If the only time my kids actually get in the bath is after I lose it and start swinging, what can I assume? I can assume there's going to be mutual resentment in our relationship. What else can I assume? I can assume I'm going to have to stay angry because that's my kids. If my anger is what makes them act, I'm going to either have to, one of two things. I either have to be super angry or I have to let them do things I don't want, let them be in control. And there's no other way. They do what they want until I'm super angry. I mean, if that's ultimately the way our nightly routine or our day-to-day breaks down, then I'm either enabling behavior that goes against the goal of my parenting, or I am controlling them in ways that damage our relationship and damage my kid. I mean, there's got to be a better way. And there is. Which brings me to letter C. What is Dobson's point? Or what point is Dobson making by including the Da Vinci quote, "He who does not punish evil commands it to be done"? What's his point there? He who does not punish evil commands it to be done. think it's okay if Dad didn't get mad. Another old coaching adage: you're either coaching it or allowing it to happen. All right, I'm either teaching this behavior or I'm allowing it to happen, and there's no other option there. All right, keep going. The second paragraph on page 42. Oh, I was going to say this about that letter C also. I just have to ask what am I enabling by not disciplining? Right? If this is not a behavior, what am I enabling or encouraging by not disciplining? Second paragraph on page 42 begins, one should never underestimate a child's awareness that he is breaking the rules. I think most children are rather analytical about defying authority. They consider the deed in advance and weigh its probable consequences. If the odds are too great that justice will triumph, they'll take a safer course. I think this is generally true. What factors might make this occasionally untrue? Here's what I will tell you. When we started being consistent with some of these concepts, we disciplined way less than we did when it was just a slow simmer until we lost our cool or just had to pretend our kids weren't doing anything wrong when they were. It turned into we gave way fewer spank. After a while, it was a shock at first for our kids, especially our oldest. He had the longest to. But what factors would make this untrue? So, what would make a child not aware that he's breaking the rules? If it's not been clearly communicated. If honestly what we're really tiptoeing around is just trying to keep Dad from losing his head, that's not just trying to keep Mom from going ballistic. That's not a clear line. And that line changes based on how you're doing that day. How Dad's feeling that day. Like what happened at work that day should not move the lines at home. But if the line is just keep Dad from going ballistic, then there are times when suddenly stuff I did yesterday when Dad was in a good mood, suddenly I'm getting punished for today. And that's not healthy. So children are aware when they're breaking the rules, when those things have been clearly communicated. The other side of that keeps that from being true is when those lines aren't consistently enforced. When, yes, I know Mom said I'm not supposed to climb on the whatever, but she's seen me do it 3 times in the last week and she just kind of looks the other way. Why am I getting, So either they haven't been drawn clearly or they haven't been enforced clearly. All right. Got to go on. 5, Dobson's 4th core principle of parenting is don't saturate your child with materialism. What things tempt a parent to violate this principle? For other people, not super spiritual people like yourselves, but why might it be tempting to saturate your child with materialism? It feels good to do stuff that they like. Why else? Your kid gets a little older. Why might it be tempting to buy them the most expensive jeans and shoes, and like when I was in junior high, it was Guess jeans. but I'm an old person. Zeke Havarici. You kind of had to have those. I didn't have those. But I wore a pair of cotton sweatpants to school every day, so I was pretty okay with it. Why might it be tempting to give your child those things? Because I don't want them to go through, that hurt. That stunk when I was the one getting made fun of for my shoes, and I don't want my kid to feel that way. Got to walk through some of that stuff. I want them to have everything. I want them to have everything. I want them to be happy. Dobson claims parents cheat their children of pleasure when they give them too much. How can that be true? They cheat their children of pleasure. It doesn't teach them to value the little things. If you think about your childhood, the times when you were having the most fun, like a lot of the times it was not because of something awesome that you had. It was you were doing something like made up and dumb with your siblings. Yeah. It doesn't give happiness. I've got to keep going here, but also what he talks about is pleasure comes from when you haven't had and then you get. And if you always have, you never know, the preciousness of something. Maybe you don't know how to take care of things well, if it'll always be replaced, that sort of thing. Then his fifth core principle, we got to land the plane here, but his fifth core principle of parenting is establish a balance between love and discipline. We've talked about this a lot, I think. He calls this the foundational understanding on which the entire parent-child relationship rests. Why is that true, and what might get that out of balance? I know we've talked about this quite a bit, but it's so important. Why is it true we have to have a balance between love and discipline, and how do we get that out of whack? Yeah, that is part of God's character. There are ramifications for disobedience, but one of the ramifications is not His love. And it's foundational because if I let my kid do whatever, there's another submitted question, several different versions. I want my kid to learn the world doesn't revolve around him or her without damaging them. If I don't discipline, then they get to do whatever they want. That is, a negative consequence of that. But I have to have them know that they are valuable. Anyway, we better shut her down right there. All right. We're moving right along. Chapter 4, next time, questions and answers. And I better pray and get us out of here. Father, thank you for being such a good Father to us. Thank you that you love us unconditionally. You love us because of your character and because you have created us and rescued us and saved us. Help us to parent in that way. Help us to be consistent and loving. Help us to keep in mind that we want the most important part of a disciplinary event comes after it. Help us to be able to communicate well during and after disciplinary events, and help us to love our kids enough to draw clear lines and enforce those calmly in a way that would benefit them. Thanks, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen.